Grab your proto-saber and join us as we fight for a cause we believe in. Welcome to the Star Wars Unlimited podcast, where we discuss how to outmaneuver your opponents. I'm Faith, and I'm joined with Jrod, Cqrbon, and his Dudeness. This week we will be discussing a fundamental aspect of Star Wars Unlimited, the aspect system. In SWU there are 6 aspects, which you will use to construct your deck around, and do what you want your deck to do. Well, there are 6 aspects to consider when building your deck. 2 of them are also considered alignments. We will get into the difference between them a little later in the pod, but for now we will focus on the 4 main aspects. Cqrbon, which aspect have you been building decks around?
Thank you, Faith, for that intro. My favorite aspect currently is Vigilance, which is the blue aspect. Vigilance is a bit of is kind of the slower, more defensive aspect out of the 4. Kind of the general like core themes of Vigilance are like healing effects and restore, which is a keyword. Like when a unit attacks, you're able to heal your base for that amount. It can be any number of restore. There's a big focus on Sentinel units that protect the base and your other units from attacks, as well as shield tokens to prevent damage. There's also some just kind of sub themes within the color. There's a lot of when defeated effects. There's a good amount, especially on the hero side, of force characters and potentially some force events going forward. We have, for example, It Binds All Things. Works well with force units. On the villain side, we have some self damage cards, things like Death Trooper, that can deal damage to your own characters to deal 2 damage to an enemy unit. We have a lot of high value cards, so cards that put a body on the board and then have an additional strong effect. So things like Luke Skywalker, the unit, can remove something with his -6/-6 potential effect. And then we have a lot of removal and specifically health based removal. So you have cards like Takedown, where it'll defeat a unit that has 5 or less remaining HP. That's kind of a theme. The difference between Blue Hero and Blue Villain: Blue Hero is more focused on defending your other friendly units, while Blue Villain's more focused on more like selfish units that protect themselves and protect your base. So like we have Obi-Wan on the hero side, that Obi-Wan has Sentinel and also has a when defeated that buffs your other units to kind of protect them, give them some more health. Whereas we have Childson on the villain side that gives himself experience to kind of protect himself and your base with that Sentinel. So yeah, but that's Vigilance, and yeah, it's by far been my favorite aspect to build with. So yeah, what do you boys think?
Vigilance is fine. It's okay. I definitely don't see me playing Vigilance very often because it does seem to lend itself more to a control strategy, which I definitely will always lean towards an aggro strategy if possible.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely, if you had to ask me, like out of the aspects, which one is feels the most control, it's definitely blue, right?
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So if you're a control player, you definitely will want to look at blue and see what it can potentially offer your deck. Now, having built with blue quite a bit, I personally think that at least with the cards that we have currently, blue is one of the weaker or the weakest aspect currently. So, what do you guys think about that? Like, Jared, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that it's definitely one of the weaker. I don't know if I'd say the weakest because it does have some of the best removal with takedown, as you mentioned before. And then also you have vanquish as well, which is a 5 cost that defeats any non-leader unit with no restrictions at all. So it has some good pieces here. I think it's just missing some early units, early game just kind of like survive to the late game. But if you can get to that late game, I mean, you have things like Luke Skywalker redemption for heroes. You have Avenger and Count Dooku for villainy. So there's a lot of good end game options to end the game. It's just about bridging that gap from the early game to the end game to play your big powerful stuff is kind of I think where blue currently struggles. But again, we don't have the full card pool, and I definitely think that in the future, blue might get a little bit more help in that area.
Hero Blue especially feels pretty weak early on, right?
Yeah, for sure. We don't have too many early cards to drop right now. And for Blue Hero, there's the Restored Arc, which is 2 cost 2/3 space unit that just says Restore 1. So a little bit of upgrade over the X-Wing. That's just a neutral hero. And that's kind of it for like 2 costs. So it's kind of a bit reliant on, at least Hero is reliant for on some other aspects for the early game cards. But I do agree that they have some very strong removal cards. Takedown has proven itself to be quite a good card in both constructed and limited.
Yeah, talking about how blue pairs with other colors, I have been playing a lot of Director Krennic, and that's the blue villainy strain. And I found success in pairing it with green and with red, but I haven't really found a good pairing of blue and yellow yet. So that's, I think, one aspect where blue is really, I think, only able to be viable in a green red with the cards we have spoiled so far. And I've been enjoying playing blue, but I do find it does lack some things in the gameplays that I've had, though Director Krennic is pretty strong.
Yeah, on
Krennic
the
is a lot better than I initially thought when I very first saw it many months ago.
yeah, he's definitely Krennic on the villain side. It definitely seems to be quite a solid leader, especially for being a common leader in constructed. He's quite good. There's also Iden Versio, which hasn't seen as much play because she's more recent than Krennic, but also seems like she has a lot of potential, especially as she can heal, which blue villain has less of than blue hero. And then on the blue hero side,
There's
we
no
have
there
we
are no
have
leaders in Blue Hero.
there are no heroes in blue leader, huh? Well, we do have Luke, who's been getting a little bit stronger
Nobody
lately,
else.
and
Just Luke.
just Luke.
Just Luke.
Well, in terms of constructed viability, yes.
Yes,
We
exactly.
have
Yeah, exactly.
when we're talking constructed, we're talking Luke Skywalker right now. And now we still have one blue hero leader that has not been revealed yet. Since we're getting three, since Luke is going to be one of the starter ones, so there is more potential for a new archetype to emerge for the blue hero side. But right now, Luke is kind of carrying that side. He has really strong ability to give other hero units shields, and he's a force unit, so he synergizes with a lot of the really powerful force-based events that we've been seeing. So I think Luke is probably the best hope for blue hero right now.
Yeah, I would
Would
say if you're playing blue in constructed, you're either playing Krennic or you're playing Luke.
would you
Well,
say
or
that
Iden as well. I think
Yeah,
has been pretty solid.
maybe.
For myself, I've been playing a lot of green. If you go on the Unlimited Deck Builder website, SWODB, shout out to Parker, you'll see a majority of green decks. A major reason for this is Energy Conversion Lab, which is a 25 health base, which has an epic action, a once per game effect, which can give one of your units which costs 6 or less ambush. I love this base, and I find it helps better enable what command is trying to do. When it comes to the hero side of green, the pairing is designed to go wide by wanting to play a lot of units. This can best be demonstrated with Admiral Akbar, a brilliant strategist, who is a 3-cost green hero ground unit that when you play, you may deal damage to a unit equal to the number of units you control in its arena. The more units you have on the board, the more damage he deals. While heroes want to have many units on the board, green villainy pairing is designed to go tall and wants to have big units on the board. This can be seen by having a 7, 8, 9, and 10 cost unit. The only 10 cost unit we have seen so far, which all have big stat. And also in the green villainy event Overwhelming Barrage, which costs 5 and gives a friendly unit +2/+2 for this phase. Then it deals damage equal to its power divided as you choose among any number of other units. Most in the community would say that at this time, this card is one of the best in the game. When you play this on one unit with lots of power, you can devastate your opponent's board. Green is mostly about having units, and so you'll see ramp effects like resupply, which when you play it, puts it into your resources, costs 3, and you'll also see offense and that will deal damage to other units based on the power of your units, like Strike True. What do you guys think of Command so far?
I'm a big fan of Command personally. I think it's a great pairing with most colors, and probably at this point, one of the strongest colors in both heroism and villainy. I do think that the fact that the base is probably the best card in the set currently spoiled, in my opinion, really makes it an easy choice to just splash the green and have the green be allowed in your deck. Like we had just said that Luke wasn't great, but you put him with green and he's good now, right? So it's like the green cards in this set are so powerful right now with, you said Strike True, Barrage, you have DJ Laser, all these amazing cards that just really help you get to your strategies faster and really put a lot of pressure on your opponent, both in heroism and villain.
Yeah, we've definitely been seeing, especially recently, we've got a few more neutral green cards as well. Just the neutral green support also. You've got cards like Agent Callus, which is just a very solid card and can be used in any deck, pretty much any green deck. And that strike two that you mentioned, also Traitorous is a new 5 cost upgrade that basically lets you take control of an opposing unit that costs 3 or less. That card has proven itself to be quite solid and very scary, especially for buff centric strategies. Yeah, overall, green seems very solid. I'll say green villain in particular looks very scary. Talking about the overwhelming barrage and also super laser technician, which is the 3 cost 2/1. When defeated, goes into your resources as a readied resource, which is that card has is phenomenal. It's very strong, enables a lot of ramping strategies, and it's to the point where if you're in green villain, you're almost always playing that card and overwhelming barrage together. On top of that, they have some lots of just very solid units, very solid cards all around. So yeah, command looks pretty scary, especially in constructed.
And command features the best leader in the game with the best ability in the game. Leia being able to attack with an extra unit. I don't know if you guys know this, but getting a free action is pretty good. Being able to present lethal when you wouldn't be able to present lethal otherwise is, well, I mean, it's game winning, literally.
Yeah,
So
I think when we saw Leia, I think I'm pretty sure we thought that she was pretty good at the time. I think she was definitely missing some tools, but now that she's gotten some more of those tools, she's proven that just with her very strong ability to attack with two rebel units in one action, that she's definitely a powerhouse. And green hero has also gotten some great stuff as well. We have things like Battlefield Marine, which is just a 2 cost 3/3 rebel unit in Green Hero, which is just it doesn't really do much, but it's just
it,
having that stat line being a rebel makes it one of the
it,
best early turn one plays in the game.
in my opinion, arguably the best 2-drop in the game for
Yeah,
constructed and limited.
yeah, it's a very very good card.
I
Um,
wouldn't even say arguably. There's no other two drop that really can compare to the stat line of the Battlefield Marine right now.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, actually,
it's pretty good.
it's a good comparison between the Battlefield Marine and the Shore Trooper. Both are 2 costs, and where the Battlefield Marine is always a 3/3, the Shore Trooper is a 2/3 to start the game, and when you have 6 resources, it becomes a 4/3. So they're two interesting units to compare. I would say the Battlefield Marine is better, but if it's later game, you can draw the Shore Trooper, which then becomes a 4/3.
Which is reasonable. 4/3 is not nothing to sneeze at, but
Speaking of 4/3s, one of my favorite cards that have been released is the Echo Base Defender, which is a 3 cost green heroism card, 4/3 stat line, and has Sentinel. I think that's been a pretty pivotal card to allow Hero Green to really compete against some of these very aggressive decks that want to just attack your face and don't want to trade. That card has been instrumental in a lot of decks.
You were also talking about which green cards are strong, and I think a really strong green card is the command card, which is one of the double aspect cards that we got, which really highlights what green is trying to do. And for costing 4, it's really great in a double green deck with Tarkin or with Leia Leader, because when you play it, one of its abilities is to put a resource into play, giving you that 5th resource to bring them out. It also can make one of your guys stronger with a with 2+1/+1 counters. It can deal damage from one of your units to a non-unique unit that your opponent controls, hopefully getting rid of them, or it can return a unit from your discard pile into your hand, so giving you some of that more power with more of your units to come and play on the field.
Personally, I would say that one underappreciated card in green currently is Consortium Star Viper. It's just a 3 cost green 3/3 ship that says when you have initiative, this unit gains restore 2. And it doesn't sound amazing, doesn't look amazing, but just currently within the meta of people playing a lot of A Wings, stuff like that, being able to play your turn one, take the initiative, and then with the green base, being able to ambush this into the A Wing and then restore 2 is just a big fact.
Some interesting things about green that we have. Dudeness, which aspect best suits you and your playstyle?
Well, I'm definitely all about aggression. Aggression is for sure the color I will be playing almost exclusively, specifically hero aggression, because they are all about trying to reduce your opponent's base to 0 as quickly as possible. And that is my entire jam, is trying to reduce your base to 0 as quickly as possible. Red villain is a bit more focused on control, right? They're a little bit more controlly with leaders like Darth Vader not deploying until 7 resources. Definitely feels like a control strategy to me versus Sabine, who deploys at 4 resources, which I don't know if you guys know this. 4 is significantly less than 7. That's why I love Hero Red. All face, all the time.
Dudeness's main mantra here is, I'm not doing the math, you do it.
Well, red definitely is a very interesting aspect. It likes to do things, as the devs have said, directly. It likes to just do things, right? It likes to just deal damage. It likes to just draw cards. No conditions, no,
Just do
no
the
red,
thing.
no red tape, right? And just blowing through that and just doing the thing. But yeah, I personally I really like red. I like aggression. We have all of the aggression leaders spoiled now, and there's a number of them that are there's a lot of different ways to build red decks, I think. So what have been some of your guys' favorite aggression leaders to build with, and what's been most effective for you in constructed?
I mean, we've already talked about it, right? Sabine. Sabine is the best red leader, without a doubt. Being able to deploy at 4 resources is absolutely incredible. Puts out so much damage. And if you can put any amount of upgrades on Sabine when she deploys, it's even worse for your opponent. It's great for you. Cards like Metal Ceremony, Wing Leader, just buffing the boy, in this case the girl, to get more damage in as quickly as possible. And then even if they do kill off Sabine, she goes back to her leader side and starts pinging more damage to finish you off. Sabine is absolutely top tier deck in the game. And unless some serious stuff comes out at the end of the set, I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah, Sabine definitely has access to some very strong tools. It's worth noting also that she's very unique in that she deploys at 4 resources, which we have not seen from any other leader so far. She's been the only leader that deploys at 4, so she enables these aggressive strategies that other decks just can't match the pace
And
of her play.
and on top of that, so like a lot of times you're playing against Sabine, and let's say you have a unit out, and let's say you have like a fleet lieutenant in your hand that you're trying to buff your unit to trade into the Sabine when she deploys. Well, the Sabine can sort of like delay her action until she deploys for so long because she can attack with her unit, then she can ping. If she has a second unit, she can attack with it. She can play her cards out. So if you're sitting there trying to like attack into Sabine when she deploys, and you're just passing, 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 that's not a winning play, because if you keep passing, passing, and it gets time for me to deploy my Sabine, I'm just going to claim and move on to the next round. You haven't used any of your resources, didn't even attack with your unit, and I've gotten as much damage as I could in the round. Like there's been many, many times where I've tried to hold up my unit to attack into Sabine so that I can take her out as soon as she deploys, and the other opponent is able to delay, just take actions while you're sitting there doing nothing.
Before this podcast turned into a Sabine love fest, I think that one of the best cards in the villainy side of this aspect is a Force Choke. I think that's a really powerful removal tool. It removes most things, including the aforementioned Sabine,
Does one
which is
shot
very
Sabine.
important. Which is very important. But just also having like Imperial Interceptor, which is a 4-cost 3/2 when played, deal 3 damage to a space unit, and it itself is a space unit, is pretty powerful effect as well. And pairing that as well with the green base potentially is a really big game swinging thing. I would say for myself personally, the best leader I've had success with would be Darth Vader. 7 cost, 5/8 on attack, deal 2 damage to a unit. He's been the best leader in red currently. For villainy, I would say Grand Inquisitor has some legs, but he definitely needs some more help. And overall, in general, I would say that red villainy is probably one of the weaker aspects right now. I think it's definitely more of like a secondary aspect instead of like a primary one where yeah, there's some good cards you'd want in a deck, but it's not like a deck in itself, if that makes sense. Whereas some other aspects, like I think like command villainy is like a deck in itself, and maybe you splash some of the red stuff in.
What both Darth Vader and Grand Inquisitor have in common is the Force trait, and that's really good with another red card, Force Throw, which is you choose a player to discard a card, and then you deal damage equal to the discarded card's cost to a unit, and
Yeah.
that could be a really strong card and make Grand Inquisitor really strong and Darth Vader both really strong leaders.
If you control a force unit is a key part of that card.
Thank you. And that's where the leaders, Vader and Grand Inquisitor, both being Force units, is important. I've actually had some success with a misunderstood red leader, and that is IG-88. I think people think about IG-88 when they see them, giving all your units raid as a way to be more aggressive. I've actually had some help leaning into that red villain aspect of control and playing a little bit later of a build. First off, my opponents usually don't expect a later IG-88 build, and it ends up having quite a bit of legs because your opponent ends up holding up removal in order to take out IG-88, and then you're able to hopefully keep your units on the board a little longer, trade more effectively. A 5/4 coming out at 5 is pretty suspect because it's easily removed, but it does have some legs, I find.
And the 5/4 dies to a 4/6. I don't know if you're aware of this or not. So there's a decent amount of 4/6 leaders roaming about. You know, Leia is a pseudo 4/6. You deploy IG, I deploy Leia. I kill IG with Leia, and I still have a 3/1 around.
I think that's an important part about IG is knowing when to bring IG out. I think other heroes and other leaders you could bring out relatively safely when they first are available. I think IG does require some protection of making sure either they're tapped out or of trying to make sure their leader's out. And so there is a little bit of finagling that needs to be involved, but I have had success playing the deck with a few games. You can check out Tower Number 9, and he has a video of IG-88 winning a match.
Winning a match, truly incredible.
Probably all scripted, to be honest. One of the things I would say about the red aspect right now is I think open fire is like vastly underplayed at the moment. I think people are like thinking it's cuttable, and
I don't think it's cuttable personally.
I've seen a lot of the decks like stop playing it a little bit or trying to trim it a little bit because I have like force throw and force choke and all that kind of stuff, and it's like no, like doing 4 damage to a unit's still pretty massive. There's no condition it can hit leaders, so if they
In a
trade
unit, yeah.
into a unit and then you can open fire it, you don't feel terrible about it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of interesting red cards, and we'll have to see how they break down in the metagame and what other cards get revealed. Jrod, which aspects have you found you have been playing against in some of your matches?
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of Boba Fett leaders right now in Cunning. He's definitely one of the stronger leaders at the moment, leveraging units like Boss and Jabba the Hutt that both are very event-oriented units, is what I would say for the villainy side. The hero side, there's a couple of leaders, but nothing that's been like super crazy. You have like Han, who's really good, who's solid, has some solid decks to build around. But I definitely think that if you're playing Cunning at the moment, villainy is the way to go. But I do think that as an aspect overall, it's a very interesting aspect because it allows you to do things that are not expected. For example, like the card Bamboozle. Well, not an amazing card. It just kind of exemplifies what the aspect is all about. Having a card in your hand that you can play when all of your units are exhausted and all of your resources are exhausted. So your opponent may think that, hey, I can do whatever I want. My opponent can't do anything to me. And having Bamboozle in hand, still being able to play it for free by discarding a yellow card and exhausting my opponent's unit and removing all upgrades from it is a pretty powerful effect at that point, kind of surprising and adding a lot of surprise factor to the cunning act. But what do you guys think? What have you guys been seeing on the tables?
I mean, definitely a bunch of Boba Fett, right? Like that's clearly the best yellow leader right now.
For sure.
And I don't see that changing at all this set. Because I don't know if you guys know this. A 4/7 stat line that comes out at 5 resources is pretty good.
Yeah, I definitely think Boba is is the strongest cunning leader out of the options that we have, and also potentially the strongest leader in the game. Just his potential for ready resources, and as Dudeness said, he's deploying as a 4/7 on 5, which compared to some other leaders that deploy, has more general stats than other leaders that deploy at 5, while still having an extremely powerful ability to ready up to 2 more resources on his deploy side. So Boba seems very scary, and in particular, he also has cards that synergize directly with him as a leader, including Fett's Fire Spray, which is an extremely scary 6-cost space unit. It's a 5/6 that if you control Boba as a leader or a unit, it enters play readied, and so it's essentially an immediate threat that they have to answer that turn, or they're going to take 5 damage to their face with that. So very scary leader so far.
One thing I find Boba Fett does, which a lot of the other cunning villainy cards do, is they have really good stats for what you're paying. You've got things like the Boba Fett unit, a 3/5 for 3, that if it attacks a unit that's been exhausted this turn, it deals an extra 3 damage. A very strong play for 3 mana, 3 resources. And you also got the newly spoiled Jabba the Hutt unit, which costs 4 and it's a 2/8. So a lot of stats that you're getting for 4 cost, that when you play Jabba, you can search your top 8 cards of your deck for a trick card and put that into your hand, shuffling the rest of your cards, putting them on the bottom. And it also makes your tricks cost 1 less. So you're just getting a lot of stats I'm finding so far in Cunning Villainy, which is kind of making me a little attracted to the color. I like playing big, fun units for relatively cheap cost.
A lot of them have some really cool when played abilities too. Like, for example, even the more aligned for draft bounty hunter crew has ambush, and then also when played, return an event from a discard pile to its owner's hand, and that's a 6-cost 4/4 villainy card.
Yeah, speaking of events, I think Cunning definitely has a focus on events with some of its cards, and it definitely has some of the strongest events in the game for sure. One of the big ones that comes to mind is Shoot First, which is a 1-cost event that lets you attack with the unit. It gets +1 power for this attack, and it also deals its combat damage before the defender. So if you defeat the defender with the attack, you won't take any damage back, making it a really powerful removal tool that's played in a lot of decks. Another really strong event has been Waylay, which is just 3 cost, return a unit to a non-leader unit to its owner's hand. So that's used to just remove a big threat temporarily from play. It it can deal with buff strategies, which is really important for some cards. There's a lot of when buff strategies are present in the meta, which they are. Each aspect like needs an answer to deal with that strategy if they come up against it, and Waylay is a phenomenal tool to deal with those strategies.
And both of those cards you just mentioned are tricks, which
Yeah,
synergize with the aforementioned Jabba the Hutt boy. So that's pretty cool.
yeah, for sure.
Well, I think my favorite double aspect card so far is Command. A lot in the community have been saying that they really enjoy the Cunning card, which is a 4-cost double Cunning card event, which has multiple effects. Some to exhaust 2 units. Like Waylay, it has an effect to bounce a unit. However, this unit has to cost less than 4 or has to have less than 4 power for the Cunning card.
Mhm.
It also can make an opponent discard a card at random and give +4 attack, yes, which is all really strong abilities, and I've seen people use each one of them effectively.
One sad point to that card is the dev said that it was gonna have +3/+0, and you may attack with that unit, but the wording didn't fit on the card, so they had to scrap that idea. And I think that would have made this card just Absolutely banana land.
Banana Land. Could you imagine getting Surprise Strike? Like, just being able to attack immediately? My
Like
goodness.
bouncing a unit and getting surprise strike all in one action. Wouldn't be me.
Seems pretty good.
Yeah, well, we talked a little bit about the cunning villainy stuff, right? Well, we can talk a little bit about the cunning hero stuff.
No, it'll be good. We can just skip Cunning here.
Well, I mean, they definitely have some potential. Some definitely need some more tools. Han Solo, I think, as a leader, has a bunch of potential. His ability lets you put cards from your hand into play as temporary resources to let you either cheat Han himself out early or cheat out larger cards ahead of curve. He also enables you to play a 3-cost card on the first turn, which is potentially his best use.
Any particular 3-cost cards you might want to be casted on the first turn?
You have some pretty good cards. The card that synergizes best with him is Falcon, which is an extremely strong, legendary 3-cost 3/4 space unit that enters play readied, which is phenomenal for making early trades and dealing with these 3 health space units. The downside to Falcon is that you either at the start of your turn you either have to pay 1 resource or return Falcon to your hand. But with Han's ability, if you use Han's ability that turn, you can to put down a temporary resource, you can, before you defeat a resource you control, you can pay for Falcon's ability, then defeat that resource you spent. So Falcon ends up that turn costing you net 0 for a 3-cost 3/4 that can attack that same turn, which is an incredibly strong card. So I definitely think Cunning Hero has some legs. We'll have to see in the future if Han can really shine.
And you guys were talking about how this deck was or this color was pretty mid, but I think it actually has a lot of good stuff. And it pairs well with Dudeness's girlfriend, Sabine, really well. And Sabine's highest damage output is always playing Millennium Falcon on turn 2. Every other option on turn 2 is worse than that, just like optimal damage wise. So this is a card that I think is going to be very important for a very long time while it's in the standard constructed format.
Speaking of cunning heroism, one of my favorite leaders in draft is Jin so far. Her ability to when you can tap her, attack with a unit, and the unit it attacks gets -1, -0, which can keep your units alive. So thinking about this idea of draft and of limited, how have you guys felt the colors do in limited? Are there some colors you prefer over others? Are there some you're finding that are stronger than others, weaker than others? What are your thoughts on the colors in limited with the cards we have spoiled so far?
Best color right now in limited is Hero Green. They have access to the best 2-drop at Battlefield Marine, followed by the best 3-drop in Echo Based Defender. And both of these are at the common rarity, which means you're likely to see multiple copies of these during your draft. And if you can get a lot of them, you're going to do quite well.
I would counter that. Sticking in the same aspect, but just different side of it, I would say that villain command is one of the best aspects for draft. Similar reasons, because you get seasoned short trooper and super laser tech, which are both also in common. But the biggest key for me that I think the hero side is missing is that in the uncommon slot, so you won't always be able to get it, but I think you should be able to get it most of the time, is Overwhelming Barrage. I think that card is absolutely insane in draft, and is a big reason why I would consider Villain Green to be one of the stronger aspects for draft currently.
And
Yeah.
Villain Green gets a bunch of the big boys too, right? Like in a draft, cards like the Gladiator,
Mhm.
cards like the Blizzard Assault, AT-AT, these are going to be able to get a lot more value, impact the game a lot more because the games typically aren't as fast as constructed.
Typically in our drafts, I see the ATST, just a villainy 6-cost, 6/7 that has Overwhelm. I see that card get passed around pretty late, and when I'm not in villainy, and I'm very confused as to why, because that's a game-winning card that can go in any villainy deck.
Hmm.
And I think that people should be prioritizing that card a bit more. Again, the packs could just be stronger, and there's obviously better cards that could be picked over it. So maybe that's just the case that's been happening. But I'm really hard pressed, especially early on, to pass on that card, which is aspectless for the context of this video or this podcast here. But it's in the only villain. It doesn't have a color, so you can just put it anywhere. I think it's a great card. People really underestimate that.
Yeah, speaking a bit on blue vigilance, just from what I've seen so far in draft, blue is solid. They have some solidly statted units. I think that the two main reasons you'd want to be in blue for for draft for limited reasons is for their removal tools and their sentinel units. So removal tools, you have Vanquish, which was mentioned earlier, 5 costs, just defeat an unleader unit. Very straightforward, kill a big thing. It's a common rarity, and it's just blue, so you can play it in either villain. Takedown also is a very strong card. Takedown is uncommon. Very solid removals. And then as far as Sentinel units, you just have some very solid. We talked about this briefly on the last episode, but you've got things like Vigilant Honor Guard, System Patrol Craft, those types of cards with Sentinel that can make it really difficult for your opponent to deal with your board and to trade efficiently.
And on the topic of removal, it would be remiss of me to not talk about Strike True, which I personally think is the best common removal we have access to in draft, because it's a lower floor than Open Fire, right? Open Fire is just straight up deal 4, but it's got a much higher ceiling, because if you can deal 5 or 6 or 7 damage to another unit for only 3, that's going to be a huge blowout in draft. It's absolutely disgusting.
Well, I hear you say that. I have found success with open fire in draft because it is able to answer things on both arenas. And I think that that's a really flexible thing to have.
And that's actually a good point about Strike True. It allows your ground or space units to interact with the other arena. I just really like Strike True. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but
Yeah, I think this is actually one of the bigger points, negative points for Cunning, is that they don't really have any direct removal. They have things like Waylay or No Good to Me Dead, which either bounces a unit back or exhausts a unit, but they don't really have a way to deal with a unit. So while I think Cunning could be a reasonable option for draft if you get some good cards, I think it's definitely more of like a secondary option for a color where you'd like to have some of the better cards for removal like Strike True or Open Fire or Overwhelming Barrage.
but Cunning, the Cunning aspect does probably have access to the best single aspect to drop in Crafty Smuggler, 2/2 Shielded Boy. That card is pretty solid, and as far as the single aspect common 2 cost cards in the other colors, it's not even close, right? You've got was the Jetta Agitator. That card's pretty poop. You've got blue doesn't even have one, right? Well, if you count the Space Boy, Distant Patroller, that card is not very good. The 1/3 Medical Droid guy, that card is not very good. But Crafty Smuggler is actually a very good and playable 2-drop for a single aspect, which there's nothing to sneeze at. Because in this game specifically, if you're not playing good things on turn 1 and 2, you are probably not going to win. It's very hard to come back in this game. Like, if you don't have cards like an Overwhelming Barrage, it's like, we were talking about Jin earlier. I've played against Jin, and the first 2 trades that Jin did in the game left her units with 1 HP left. And there is 0 chance I was ever coming back in that game.
Well, it's interesting considering which color pairing that you're going to draft with and take in your games. It does add an interesting dynamic with the hero and villainy cards, and hero and villainy as an aspect in general. As we mentioned earlier, they're a little different from the other 4 main aspects. Hero and villainy have been considered like alignments, and so, well, for purposes of the game, they're considered an aspect like the other 6. In the development, they're a little different. We have yet to see 2 of the 4 main aspects together on a card, though I assume we'll see that in the future. But we have seen cards that are one of the main aspects with one of these alignments. We can also see in the hero and villainy cards in general that they mirror each other. We'll see things like Wing Leader versus TIE Advance, which when played give a unit, either a Rebel or Imperial, depending which one, 2 +1/+1 experience counters. We can also see the difference in Fleet Lieutenant versus Snowtrooper Lieutenant, which, when played, give one of their respective traits +2/+0, and they can attack, and in General Veers and General Dodonna, each giving their respective trait +1/+1. In draft, these are interesting because no matter what aspect you're in already, you can take them. I found that they have been that they get taken really quickly because of that fact. So, what do you guys think of the difference between heroism and villainy?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's not too much of, I guess, between the neutral heroism and villainy, there's not too like drastic of a difference, right? Like you said, a lot of the cards like kind of mirror each other a little bit. I think the important part and the base difference is going to be the traits on these cards, because we have rebels on one side and imperials on the other, and there's a lot of cards and effects that want to deal specifically with Imperials and rebels. So, for example, Leia, who been a very solid, very strong limited leader, really wants to have more rebels, and so these neutral white hero cards, right, give her more rebels to work with. And same with something like Tarkin, who wants Imperials to buff, and Tarkin's also very solid limited leader. I think these are mainly here to give more bodies to these decks that just need cards with relevant traits.
I think another way we see the difference in the difference between heroism, villainy, and the other aspects is the other four aspects all have bases. And we've been told that at least early on, for at least the first three sets, we're not going to have hero and villainy bases. And so in deck construction, that's kind of like the hard divide where you can mix command, you can mix aggression, you can mix cunning and vigilance however you want. You can't mix a hero leader with a villain base as of right now.
Yeah, personally, I wouldn't necessarily want to see a heroism or villainy base because I don't think that would make much sense to have like Luke have a villainy base or something like that. At least with the way the current card pool is, I think it would just kind of like break some things. I think it's better off just to keep those separate. To be honest,
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
There's definitely some interesting aspects to consider when choosing which aspects you're going to use in your deck. Please comment below on which aspects you enjoy playing, whether that be for constructed or for limited, and which cards you have found powerful. Thank you very much for joining us.
Wait, we didn't let Carbon talk about Chewie.
Oh yeah, we were gonna
Carbon,
do that.
Chewie corner, bro.
Oh, the Chewy Corner, Carbon's Chewy Corner. We'll have to do that next week. Sorry about that, Carbon. Well, thank you guys for joining us as we run out of time. Please look in the description for our other channels, subscribe to us, and we look forward to hearing from you as we go next week to outmaneuver your opponents.